Uh, Good morning, folks. My name is Sharon Srivatsa, and I serve as the president of Real, and all that it means is that I work for you. Today, I'm super excited to be with all of you live today because we have some interesting things happening in the real estate industry, and all I want to do is to support you, to share with you, to help you think through and help navigate all of this. And I called this session Navigating the New World with Grace. Navigating the New World with Grace. So we have about three kind of different groups of people on the call. First is groups of our agents from Real, agents from anywhere else. I'm so glad that you're with us. We're here to serve you. We're here to support you. Super excited that you're with us. Number two, we probably have some consumers who are homeowners, buyers, sellers who are not actively in the real estate industry on the call. If you are on, you're welcome to stay on if you would like, but this is going to be more industry facing. So if you get bored and you leave, that's totally okay. So for our consumers on the call, we may also have some press and media on the call. So I welcome. Thank you so much for being with us. There is nothing that is secret that we're going to talk about. This probably may not be as helpful to you, but our goal is to share the industry-based implementation with our agents on this call overall. So you're welcome to hang out, welcome to stay with us, and hopefully this is helpful to you as well. So for those of you coming on, please, what we're going to do is to use the chat. As you're going to use the chat, my team's going to watch it and manage it in case something comes up, but we're going to use the chat actively going forward. So if it's okay with you, what I'm going to do is I just need a 1 in the chat that will tell me to go. And then I can go. All right. So we've got a 1. That means you can see me and you can hear me, and we are ready to go. So your chat's working. That also means my chat's working. That means we're going to have a really good time being with each other today. All right. So I want to take you through something that I put together for you, and I call this Navigating the World with Grace. Navigating the World with Grace. And the most important part about the operative word on this is grace. There's a lot that is happening in the world right now. And I think that if we can approach this with warmth, with courage, with grace, it would be a very, very positive thing overall. So the operative word is grace. And so I want to start with this. There's a lot going on in the world right now, both domestically and abroad. And I would just want to offer this sentiment as I start, is to be kind. For everyone you meet is fighting a hard battle that you know nothing about. So I know that we have to deal with these industry changes overall, but please know that this affects different people in different ways, both in the US and elsewhere. So I would offer to start with be kind. For everyone you meet is fighting a hard battle that you know nothing about. All right. So let's jump into this. You're probably here today because you want to know 3 big things. Number 1, you want to know, hey, what is this story so far? What is all these things that I have not even kind of kept speed on? What has actually been happening so far? Sharon, get me up to speed, catch me up, right? That's what you want, because the last thing you want to do is to go read something. I understand that. Number 2, right, is there's this thing that happened on Friday with the NAR settlement. And there were a few things that happened which made the social media world go crazy, that our industry is going to change and the unicorns are going to start fly again and all of that. Well, you want to know exactly what that means. And the third is you want to know what actually happens next. You know, how does it affect our clients? How does it affect you? And how does it affect the industry as a whole, right? You're probably here for that. So if you're here for this, I have to ask you a question. On the disc profile, if you are a high D, can you put a D in the chat? On the disc profile, if you're a high D, put a D in the chat. So it's a very common question to ask in the real estate business, right? So the high Ds, who are all of you, are thinking, man, he's going to go through this 15, 20-minute presentation telling me all of these things. Well, you know what high Ds want to know? Heidi's want everything up front. Heidi's want the reverse of the presentation. They want the last slide up front. They want all the facts up front. So I'm going to give you the Heidi presentation in the next 2 slides, because then you can watch it and then you can just leave because you're not going to be interested in any of the other details. So I'm just going to give you the Heidi version of this right away. All right. Here's the Heidi version of this. So let me explain how this works. So I live in this little beach town in California called Laguna Beach. And I mapped some traffic, a route all the way to Los Angeles, which is about, call it 60 miles from where I live. Well, there's 2 routes that it came through. Route number 1 was roughly 1 hour and 12 minutes. And route number 2 was roughly 1 hour and 9 minutes. So in essence, there's a 3-minute delta between these two routes, right? And the reason I'm telling you this is that this is exactly what we're dealing with right now from this perspective of all of this. The result is exactly the same, right? Now, a lot of things may change, but the result is exactly the same. I am going to get from Laguna Beach to Los Angeles. You are going to help a consumer buy or sell a house. The result is exactly the same. There are probably two routes, a route that you're used to and a route that you're not used to. And the new route just probably takes 3 minutes longer. That's all this is. 3 minutes longer. And there's a few things associated with this. So now you may be saying, Sharon, all right, cool. I get it. It's the same result. There's not a lot changing as of now. What are the things that are changing, right? Here's the thing that are changing. I want to give you the ultimate oversimplification of what we're doing because you now have a detour. It's the same destination, but it's a different route. And the oversimplification is the similar destination, but the route is slightly different. And so here are the two things you need to know. Number one, co-op compensation will no longer be posted on the MLS. And conceptually speaking, assume that every buyer is going to sign a contract while working with an agent. Literally, these are the two things that you need to know. All right. Slightly different route. Co-op compensation will no longer be in the MLS and everybody's going to sign a contract. So if all you high Ds out there, you can leave. That's all you need to know because everything else is just a function of implementation. That's all it is. Now I'm going to go through and give you the pieces of this implementation overall so that you get a good sense of it so you can understand it in a really clean way. Now, here is the next step to the puzzle. I know there's going to be a lot of details. You're going to be like, Sharon, you're going to cover X and cover Y. That's all this is, right? So let me give you a disclaimer and let me tell you the truth. Number one, I am not an attorney, right? I am also not your managing broker, right? If you ask my wife, she will tell you that you should never listen to anything I ever say about any topic in the entire world except the Anaheim Ducks. So if you are an Anaheim Ducks fan, you and I should talk about this. I'm just a guy who wants to help you. All right. I'm just a guy who wants to help you. Now that you know all of this, let's actually break down something. And let me tell you this something. So for you high Ds right now, I'm going to give you all my recommendations. You probably should take a screenshot of this and I will post this over and over. These are my 5 recommendations that we're going to come back to over and over in this entire entire topic. Number one, I'm going to show you how and why you need to develop and deliver a value proposition for the buyers 10 times better than your listing presentation. Number two, I'm going to show you why you need to elegantly explain economics and compensation. Economics when it's related to what it means for the seller. Compensation is related to what it means for the agent. Number 3, you're going to have to learn how to utilize a buyer broker agreement. Number 4, there's going to be some new adjustments in forms and workflows. And last but not least, you got to work hard and be kind. These are my only recommendations. So if you're a high D, if you're a high driver, this is all you need to know. All right. So take a picture of this. This is all you need to know. And I'll go into everything else right now. So here's what I did. This is my son, Neil, and this is my daughter, Laura. My son, Neil, is 12. My daughter, Laura, is 8. And I actually took them through this entire presentation, meaning there is no tons of slides with tons of bullet points and all of that for you today. If you want me to like completely deconstruct this entire settlement, that is not what you're going to get today. All right. What you're going to get is everything that happened in how an 8-year-old can understand it. So if an 8-year-old can understand it, essentially a 2nd and 3rd grader can understand it. That's what you're going to get. So you're going to see more pictures, drawings, and ways in which you can understand all of this and have some fun along the way. That's what you're going to get. All right. Now, you may also end up going to other sessions that give you more detail on all of that, but I'm going to make sure that I arm you with everything that you need to know. After this session, you're not going to need much apart from just keeping up with the changes that come about overall. All right. So so just know that I'm going to talk I'm going to be a lot of oversimplification. Here is the game plan for today. All right. Before I get started with all of this, number 1, I'm going to take you on the story so far in 1 slide. Number 2, I'm going to explain to you exactly what happened on March 15th. Number 3, I'm going to give you an understanding of what I learned over the last 3 days. In fact, I got a PhD in all of this over the last 3 days. Number 4, I'm going to show you how to understand the facts. Number 5, I'm going to show you how to process the emotions. Number 6, I'm going to show you what actions you need to actually take. Number 7, there's a bunch of top of mind questions that all of you have. And number 8, I'm going to finish with the 4 things we should do right now. This is my game plan for today. So if this all sounds good, Can you put a G for game plan in the chat? Just put a G for game plan in the chat. Okay, cool. This is my game plan. I think you like it. So let me actually dive right into it. All right. So thank you so much. I can't believe that we're all together today. Thank you so much for being with us. Hopefully this is helpful to you and hopefully you take some good things out of this today. So thank you so much. All right. So let me actually give you the story so far. The story so far is this, and this is a extreme oversimplification of everything that actually happened. So here's the story. Let me tell you the first thing. So there was this class action lawsuit that happened, and the class action lawsuit had a couple of things related to it. It's talked about the conspiracy to inflate commissions and price fixing. Those were the things that came up at a very high level. And who was named in that lawsuit? Who was named in that lawsuit? The NAR was named in the lawsuit. A bunch of brokerages were named in the lawsuit via the idea that we were inflating commissions and price fixing to cooperation compensation, right? That's what happened. Then there was this trial that happened, and there was a verdict. And that verdict, just in the state of Missouri, offered a lot of damages associated with this and big numbers. And we are trying to figure out exactly what all of that meant. And last but not least, based on all of this that would just happen in Missouri, you started getting copycat lawsuits using Missouri as a precedent. They started having copycat lawsuits across the country. This is a big old mess that happened. And this is the story so far. Okay. This is the story so far. Now, if that makes sense, let me take you to part 2 of the puzzle. Something happened on Friday, right? By the way, just chill, because I told you the truth. My recommendations were really simple. So don't worry about any of this. I'll take you through all of this, right? Understanding what happened on Friday. Let me break down what happened on Friday. There are 3 things that happened on Friday. There was a NAR settlement that happened on Friday. I'm going to break that down for you. There was a couple of rule changes and there are a couple of next steps. So let me actually explain how this worked. Here's what happened in the NAR settlement. This NAR settlement in a big, broad way wraps all the members in some possible approach to try and solve all of this. Based on that, there's a bunch of rule changes because now the settlement includes 2 things. It includes money and it includes a promise for new practices going forward, right? That's all it is. By the way, it's just a different route to the same destination. You're just taking a different route. You'll get there the same exact way. And what are the next steps? Let me tell you the next steps, and I'll take you through the pieces of this. Here are the next steps. The next steps are, first, the judge has to approve of all of this, right? You know that I'm not an attorney, but the judge has to approve of all of this. Then we have to figure out how to implement all of this. Then we have to, not all parties are actually free. There's some brokerages and some MLS. There's other parties that still need to litigate and manage the lawsuit and all of these ideas. And most importantly, they're saying that a lot of this are going to go live roughly in July 2024. So this is what happened on Friday. There was a little settlement. The rule changes involve some money and new practices. A bunch of things need to happen and how this needs to get implemented. That's all you need to know. Now, if you read the settlement, it'd be crazy, but you don't have to. This brings us to something that I want to say again. This is like when you're driving down a highway, on the highway that you already know, of servicing clients that you already do, there is a little detour. The detour takes you to the same place. It is a similar destination on a slightly different route, right? It is a similar destination on a slightly different route. We don't know all the details, which is why I don't want you to like freak out. That's all this is, a similar destination in a slightly different route. So let me tell you about my 3-day PhD. And here is the thing that you're going to really enjoy. All right. So question for you. If you made a post or video about this NAR thing so far, can you put a me in the chat, please? If you made a post or a video about this NAR thing so far, can you put a me in the chat? A lot of people talked about it, which is good, right? A lot of you are talking about it. There's a lot of me's in the chat, as you can tell, right? A lot of you talked about this, which is super helpful. Thank you so much for educating your clients, educating your consumers. You made a story about it. This is great. If you didn't put it in, no problem. By the way, it's not even worried. And for those of you who shared my post, that I appreciate that. But here's the thing that happened. There's a lot of interesting stories that happened on Friday. So this is my friend Josh Rubin. Josh Rubin says, hey, this attorney is going to get $138 million from NAR settlement and needs a place to live in New York City. I got him a place. What is he trying to do? Clearly, Josh is just stirring the pot, right? It's okay. Then you have things like, hey, Zillow is going to go broke. Like, okay, it's got 510 comments. Zillow is not going to go broke, okay? Here's the other thing. This is ridiculous. I'm just glad I focus on being a listing agent, buy by buyer's agents. Now, this I'm glad this is an anonymous member, but this is dumb because you can't be a listing agent without bringing a buyer to actually kind of consummate the transaction. So that's weird. So please don't say things like, I'm going to be a listing agent, buy by buyers. There's two sides to a transaction. Kind of weird. All right. But here's the crazy part. The crazy part is this guy asked a question: who pays the selling broker commission? And we actually have 4 different answers to this. We as a industry can't even explain and agree on how commissions are paid. That's how crazy this is, which is weird. But the crazy part is, think about this one. I want to show you this. This says, this lady, I mean, this is all private. This lady says, hey, with the NAR ruling, am I correct in saying that even though sellers agree to pay a 6% commission, I can't share that with the buyer's agent? How can they tell me how to disperse my commission? That's a whole new can of worms. By the way, there's so many things technically wrong with this and technically interesting in this, but here's what people are thinking. But the most important part about this is the same person. She is such a cool person, is then posted this: hey, instead of figuring out this NAR crap, I'm just going to start taking applications for a sugar daddy. Like, this is what's happening on the internet right now, right? Which is wild, right? So I want you to recognize this because this is very interesting, because I posted this video on Friday. It went kind of baby viral. I got 400,000 views, 5,000 plus shares, you know, a lot of saves, a lot of comments, and thank you all for sharing this. And in a small way, it went viral. But here's the crazy part. The crazy part is this: the hate is off the charts. I want you to recognize that the hate is off the charts. Here's what this person says: I am a real estate agent. This person's like, I am a real estate agent. I've had my license for 2 years. It's not that hard. I'm a real estate photographer now, and that's hard. Here's what this says: agents are parasites, and it's time for them to go. And this guy's like, you aren't worth a penny. You're no more useful than a cashier, right? The hate is off the charts. In fact, this is hate from a fellow agent. An agent messaged me this directly on Instagram, and he says, realtors are not valuable anymore with the use of tech. This is the destruction of current real estate model, and we have clowns like you put a positive spin on it, which is wild. This is hate. This is an agent, right? Just think about what we're doing. This is an agent. And the insecurity is off the charts. And this agent is saying, do we actually provide any value? Aren't we simply BS artists? In reality, aren't we just smooth talkers who merely profit of buying and selling where other people of others? This is what's happening right now. I just want you to know this, and I want to protect you. Here's what I'm sharing all of this with you. I want to protect you from this negativity. Just, you have to stay away from this negativity for a minute. Right? This is the PhD that I received in the last few days. Don't worry about them. You can reduce your posting. Don't worry about them. But in a lot of ways, we have to fight the optics of what this is, right? We have to fight the optics of what this is. And that's what I want to share with you today. And here's my learnings, right? And before I go into all the details, here's my learnings. It's only human to fear the unknown. Number 2, when the playing field changes, it's normal to be insecure and second guess our capabilities. And number 3, we tend to get protective when our livelihood is challenged. Don't worry about, please, I want you to put some grace into this. Please don't worry about their agents, whether they had a bad 2023 or whether they're not skilled, or bye-bye agents that are less capable. Leave all good stuff with this one. We have to change our mind for grace. That is not the time for this right now, right? Because the optics of the industry, the optics of how we do things are hanging in the balance. And I'm going to show you how to actually get past the optics. And it starts with starting with a lot of grace. All right. So here are the learnings. Number 1, it's fear is just human. There's a lot of insecurity, and we get protective when our livelihood changes, right? So here's a few things. So I want to tell you this, and I'm going to actually give you all the details of this puzzle. Only when we're in a good place can we make good decisions. And that's why I'm offering to you. I shared all of that with you, not to bring hate into this conversation, but I wanted to share this with you so that we can all be in a good place when we make these decisions. And we can only be in a good place when 3 things are in place. So let me actually explain this. Number 1, we have to understand the facts. And I'm going to give you the 5 new rule changes that are actually important to know about. Number 2, we have to process our emotions. And I'm going to give you another 5 things that people are saying, like the real estate industry is going to come to an end and all of that. And I want to show you how to process the emotions overall. And number 3, I want to show you how to adjust our actions. And I'm going to give you the big 8 ideas on how we can actually adjust our actions. So in the next 10 minutes, I'm going to show you how to understand the facts, the exact rule changes that you know. I'm going to give you the 5 ways to process our emotions, and I'm going to give you 8 ways to adjust our actions. That is our jam for the next 5 or 10 minutes. All right. So here's how we think about all of this. So let's actually dive right into it. So here's about understanding the facts, right? Let me understand the facts. The first thing, hopefully you didn't have to read this settlement. I read the settlement so that you don't have to. This was 108 pages long, and I will tell you it was really hard. In fact, I read the settlement and I literally felt like this. I was trying to figure out how I can make all of this work. I am not a lawyer. I try to understand the settlement, and I'm like, this is super hard, right? Our in-house counsel is reading this and she's making notes. And I'm like, this is really, really hard. So let me break down a few of these rules for you. Here are the 5 rules that you need to know, and there's nothing you need to take notes on. By the way, I'll give you all the slides. I'll give you everything, right? Here's the first one. Rule number 1. I'm not going to read this all for you, but here's rule number 1 says, to eliminate and prohibit any requirement by the National Association of Realtors or the boards that listing brokers or sellers must make offers of compensation to buyer brokers or buyer representatives, and eliminate and prohibit any requirement of that such offers, if made, must be blanket or unconditional or unilateral. What in the world does this mean? Like, what in the world does this mean? Right? But the key part about this is these 2 words, if made. And let me explain rule number 1 on what rule number 1 means. Rule number 1 means these things. Number 1, they're going to remove the requirement of co-op compensation from the MLS. But 2, offers of compensation can be made. That's it. They're going to remove the requirement of co-op compensation from the MLS, but offers of compensation by the seller can be made. That is rule number 1. Okay, good. Let's go to rule number 2. Rule number 2, prohibit realtor MLS participants, subscribers, and other real estate brokers and real estate agents and their sellers from making offers of compensation on the MLS to buyers and brokers and other. Like, what in the world does this stuff mean? But the key thing in this is on the MLS. That is the key thing, meaning we cannot make offers of compensation on the MLS. That is the second rule. No more offers of compensation can be made on the MLS. That is rule number 2. Okay. Yes, that is co-op compensation. No more offers of co-op compensation can be made on the MLS. That is rule number 2. All right. Rule number 1, remove the requirement that any co-op compensation actually exists, but offers can be made. Rule number 2, cannot make offers of compensation on the MLS. By the way, attorneys get to say the same thing in 17 different ways. So here's number 2. You cannot make offers of compensation on the MLS. Here's number 3. So there's a question like, hey, can you actually do co-op compensation on showing time on your own website? All of that. Yes, you can do that. That's number 2. Here's number 3. Just hang with me while I read this before you start having questions, right? Require realtor MLSs to eliminate all broker compensation fields on the MLS, prohibit from sharing the offers of compensation to buyer brokers, blah, 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 blah. Eliminate all broker compensation fields on the MLS. So what this means is you won't see a place to enter or view co-op compensation on the MLS anymore. You cannot put it in the remarks. You cannot try to like secretly bury it somewhere. The MLS, you cannot offer co-op compensation on the MLS anymore, right? That's it. So please chill. I'll give you how all of this works, right? So that's this rule number 3. You won't see a place to enter or view co-op compensation. Here's rule number 4. Agree to not create, facilitate, or support any non-MLS mechanism, including providing listing information to internet aggregators for such purpose. However, this provision is not violated by a bunch of things. Here's what this means. As long as the brokerage, by the way, I think a lot of you know this, the brokerage owns the listing, right? The brokerage represents the listing. You are the agent that is affiliated with the brokerage. But the key part of this, the brokerage can offer compensation on their own websites for their own listings. I see a lot of comments about like the MLS and NAR and all of that. Can I please offer you something? Please let me offer you something. Just let's explore this with a little grace, all right? Whether they're good or not good, bad or not bad, it's irrelevant. Our job right now is to navigate the new world with grace, right? I want to give you the tools because if you can navigate the world well, everything will get a lot easier overall. All right. So the brokerage can offer compensation on their own websites for their own listings. All right. Here's rule number 5. By the time I read these, I get a headache. Require realtors and realtor MLS participants acting for sellers to conspicuously disclose to sellers, obtain seller approval for any payment, and such disclosure must be made in writing, provided in advance. We don't even know what this means. And let me explain what this means. They're actually saying that a seller in writing can provide an agreement to pay the cooperating broker. They're literally telling us that if there is this, if the seller not only can offer this, but if a seller does offer this, then they just have to do it in writing and in agreement and in advance of everything. Essentially, all they're saying is a seller can sign an agreement with the listing broker that he or she will pay X to the buyer broker. Right? Now, it's all, and I'll get to the meaning of this. This is all the rules that you need to know. Okay? These are the 5 rules that you need to know. So let me pause. Let me pause. How fun was that, right? In some of the states, this already exists in your documents. In some of the states, it doesn't. There's going to be some new rule documents. I'm just giving you, in my personal opinion, the 5 rules that stood out that you need to know about. Literally, that's all you need to know. I see a lot of comments that says, same old. We already have this. Do you remember what I said when we started out? We go from Laguna Beach to Los Angeles. There are 2 routes to get there. One route is 3 minutes longer than the other route. That's all it is. It is the same destination in a different route. It is a detour, right? So just approach the detour with grace, and we have to learn a few things. That's all it is in this process. Cool. So now let me actually show you about how to process some emotions overall in this matter. So here is that. But here's the truth before we process any of these emotions, right? First, anything could happen. Tomorrow, something crazy may happen. Anything could happen, right? But what we need to know, the people who are freaking out either don't understand what is happening or are too afraid that their lack of skill is going to be exposed. All right? The people who are freaking out either don't understand what is happening or are too afraid that their lack of skill is going to be exposed. I want you to not be one of these 2 people, right? Because in this, when I shared the rules with you, because I read 108 pages of this and I've tried to make sense of this, I want you to understand what's going on. And I'm going to show you about how their lack of skill is going to actually work. So these are the only 2 people. So here is the first one. I want to start with myth number 2. Myth number 2 is this. The 6% commission will cease to be the norm. This is myth number 2. No, this is not true. Because you go from Laguna Beach to Los Angeles. There are 2 ways to get there. It's the same exact thing. It is a detour, right? Which means the listing agent will advise the clients to offer cooperating commission. Because if they don't offer a cooperating commission, then they know that they're going to be at a competitive disadvantage. And because of that, all they're going to have to do is they're going to have this decoupling. They're going to have this decoupling. It is the same destination. The seller, and I'll tell you about how all of this works, but if the listing agent, if you as a listing agent, you don't offer to your client, you don't advise your clients to offer cooperative compensation or buyer broker compensation, then you know that there's going to be a competitive disadvantage. That's all this is, right? Please don't worry about commissions being negotiable. Please don't worry about what the norm is. Please don't worry about what standard commissions are. Please don't worry about any of that, right? All that happens right now is that the 6% commission, this is a myth and this is not going to happen. Cool. Here's the next one. Here's myth number 1, that home prices will drop. Well, no, that's not going to happen because compensation doesn't really change. It is just a detour. Commissions don't drop because you're just going to have a different way of how this all works. Therefore, home prices don't drop. Like, no, this does not work, right? A lot of the main media news is trying to do clickbaity stuff to like scare people. Home prices will not drop because unless the implementation of all of these rules happens in a really dramatic way that affects all of us, I don't see a path for home prices dropping, right? Myth number 3, steering will be less common. Let me explain what steering is. So steering is where a buyer steers their client to one property or another based on a certain set of variables. Either it may be based on whether based on the co-op compensation that's offered. It may be based on the type of property. It may be based on the suitability of the property. Heck, buyer agents have been steering for ever since the beginning of time. A lot of times we tell our buyers, hey, don't really go to that FSBO. I already checked him out. He's crazy. Or like you steer. Or you talk to even if somebody's offering a 3% co-op commission, you talk to them and you realize the seller is completely unreasonable and you steer away. Steering is very normal, right? And steering is alive and kicking and it's not going to go anywhere. Seller is going to offer compensation. Agent's going to find out what that compensation is, and the buyer agent is going to advise or steer. Very normal. So it's going to be just fine. Number 4, 1 million real estate agents are going to leave the profession. This is not true. Like, come on. Like, this is not true. All right. There's going to be no change, no material change in compensation, and there's going to be no drop in commissions. There's just going to be different mechanics. This is decoupling. How people get paid is going to change, not what they get paid, right? It's really, really simple, right? And here's myth number 5. Amazon or Zillow and unicorns will take over real estate and we will all become obsolete. Let me please state something about this, right? Amazon, Zillow, unicorns will take over real estate and we will all become obsolete. I will tell you this right now. I will put a challenge and a wager out to the world. If all real estate agents on the planet stopped working for 1 week, just stopped working, nothing would sell. Nothing would sell, right? Nothing would sell. And as an insider in the industry, I would never buy or sell a home or invest in a home without a real estate agent, right? The process is too complex. And you know what? It's our fault. It is our fault that we have created these optics for the consumer to not actually understand exactly what we did. And I'm just going to tell you, it is actually a lot of the talking heads and a lot of the substandard coaches and consultants' fault, because they teach us that we should market more about ourselves. We should say how great we are, how we have succeeded where they have failed, how we sold 14 more homes, how we are number one along with 4,000 other people that are number one in our community. That is why we've gotten a bad rap, right? Instead, if you turn around and actually have better skill, and instead, if we can actually explain to the client the value that we bring to the table, instead, if we can show the clients our process, I always talk about this where you showcase the complexity, but you deliver the simplicity. You don't say, I'll take care of all of it. You tell them, here's everything that needs to be handled, and then I will take care of all of it. You have to showcase the complexity and then deliver the simplicity. Our job is not to make them unaware of what's going on. Our job is to show them everything that needs to happen and how we take care of it. It is our fault that we have created poor optics where people realize that all they think we do is nothing. In fact, we do so much that they don't really understand it. We have to get better at it. You have to showcase the complexity, but then deliver the simplicity. All right. That brings me to the thoughtfully adjust actions. I want to give you 8 actions that I think will really be helpful to you on how we can thoughtfully adjust what we're going to do next. Here's the first one. And the first one is we have to understand this because I think it will dramatically help everybody in this process. And I call this the cardinal rule of real estate. And let me explain exactly what this means. We have a seller and we have a buyer, right? A seller has a house and a buyer is looking for a house. Here's the cardinal rule of real estate. A seller is looking for a buyer and a buyer is looking for a house. And it is our job as the agents to facilitate that. Don't overthink this. Your job in the living room on a listing appointment is not to talk about marketing. Your job in the living room is to talk about finding a buyer, because a seller is looking for a buyer and a buyer is looking for a house, right? Your job with a buyer is not to talk about loyalty. Your job with the buyer is not to talk about the buyer broker agreement. Your job with the buyer is not to talk about how great you are and how many sides you've represented. Your job with the buyer is to talk about how they can get a home that they want at a price that they want at the terms that they want, right? A seller is looking for a buyer and a buyer is looking for a home. And it is our job to facilitate that. Okay, that's big idea number 1. Here's big idea number 2. Please, okay, by the way, if you have not been paying attention, this would be a good time to pay attention, all right? So please allow me 2 minutes, if you can just give me 2 minutes where I can just give you the scripting and the value that you can actually use to help clients overall. when you talk to a client, both in a listing presentation or in a buyer consultation, I want you to talk about this broad idea. You can take my idea overall and adapt it and adjust it if it doesn't work perfectly for you. But here is the broad idea. The broad idea is, Mr. and Mrs. Client, the real estate transaction is governed by 3 agreements. Agreement number 1 is between you, the seller, and me, the listing agent. Great. Agreement number 2 is between the buyer and the buyer agent or the buyer broker, right? And agreement number 3 is the purchase agreement that is governed by whom? Either title or escrow or an attorney. When you explain these 3 agreements, it allows us to understand who gets representation. Because in this case, the listing agent represents the seller, the buyer's agent represents the buyer, and a neutral third party, title, escrow, or the attorney, represent the contract. This is how real estate is done. What this does is this allows people to understand that the listing agent has representation, therefore there's compensation required for their representation. The buyer agent has representation, so there's compensation required for that representation. And then there's escrow or title or with the purchase agreement has representation, which is a title or escrow to the attorney, and that has compensation. Whoever is being represented has representation and compensation based on representation, right? This is how you explain it. You don't say something like, oh my gosh, you know, I need loyalty, therefore, like that's not it. You explain it contractually. All right. Here's number 3. I want to tell you the importance of a buyer broker agreement. The importance of a buyer broker agreement has 3 pieces. Number 1, it has an alignment piece. The alignment allows you and the buyer to be in alignment that both of you are going to work on this together. Work on this together. So that is the alignment piece. The alignment also allows for compensation. The alignment says, hey, you're going to help me do XYZ, and I'm going to pay you A by ABC. And they also now know the only way someone is going to agree to compensation with you is if they understand the services that you offer, because it's our job to showcase the complexity and then deliver the simplicity, right? The world in the future is going to look like, just like everybody is going to have an agreement. You're not going to take a listing without a listing agreement. You're not going to work with a buyer without a buyer broker agreement or buyer agency agreement or whatever the state calls it. It gets you alignment. And the reason, by the way, the reason why most people have not worked with buyer agency agreements or buyer broker agreements in the past, the number 1 reason is not because they're scared. It's not because it's hard to ascertain value. None of that. The reason is because it's not been mandatory. The listing agreement, you knew that would you sign a non-exclusive listing agreement? That would be weird. But in essence, every time you take a buyer out, you have a non-exclusive buyer agreement. And then you get mad, and we get mad when we say, oh, buyers are liars. Buyers are liars was something randomly concocted by somebody 42 years ago who's never actually talked to a client in their lives, right? It is our job to take a lot more responsibility in this. And the world this is actually making it easier to get representation in place, because representation requires there's compensation and there's services, and it allows us to line up and actually deliver those services. It is a good thing, right? It is a good thing. Here's number 4. If you were not paying attention so far, please give me 30 seconds so I can actually break this down for you. It doesn't matter if you've been using a buyer agency agreement. It doesn't matter if you think these are standard commissions. This is a new world. There's a new route that we have to go through. It doesn't matter what you did in the past. It doesn't matter how good. It doesn't matter what you did in the past. It doesn't matter how good you are. It doesn't matter how well you've done this. It doesn't matter how much you have changed. It doesn't matter if nothing changes in your world. None of that matters. What I'm trying to tell you is, the route from Laguna Beach to LA there's a different route, right? Mechanics are going to be a little different. Form factor is going to be a little different. Process is going to be a little different. Just be open to that and a little grace. I think you'll all do just fine. But please stay with me for 1 minute. All right. I want to explain this to you. Here's how this works. I'll give you a different color. How this works is, in the old world, a seller would pay the listing agent or the listing broker. That's what they would agree to. The listing broker would then pay the buyer agent or the buyer broker. That's how that would work, right? That's how that would work. In the new world, and so because of this, they have this horizontal price fixing idea, right? Now, here's the new world. In the new world, a seller pays the listing agent. The seller could also offer something directly to the buyer, and the buyer may also offer, based on what happens, something directly to the buyer. What we don't want, And we cannot have anything here. This needs to be, there's a firewall between the two. This is called decoupling of the commissions. That's all this is, right? So this doesn't happen anymore. You don't get to share anything. So we all were saying from the decoupling is a listing agent works with the seller, seller pays listing agent. Buyer agent works with the buyer. Either buyer negotiates as a seller concession, or the buyer pays the buyer agent directly. That's all this is. It's just the decoupling of the commissions. All right. Now, how does the buyer broker get paid? Let's please talk about this. Give me, this is a good example of how nobody really knows how anybody gets paid. This is, even agents can't answer this question well. So let me tell you how a buyer broker gets paid. Either the seller pays the commission to the buyer, right? Please don't do the attorney thing, right? Like, I would not say, I think the idea, yes, it totally depends, but you don't want it depends. When you're talking to a seller, right? When you're talking to a seller or you're talking to a buyer, you want to talk in high degree of certainty, right? Our job is not, it depends. Our job is not, it may happen, or none of that. Our job is certainty. And certainty involves delivery of options, because when you don't know your options, you don't have any, right? Certainty of options is important. So how you would say is, so if I were representing to a buyer and I was talking to a buyer, I would say, hey, Mrs. Buyer, would it be okay if I talked you through how the economics of this transaction works, specifically how I get to represent you and how I get paid? Would that be okay? And they'll be like, of course. Hey, it's probably in one of three ways in which I get paid. And let me walk you through it. Number one is the seller pays me as part of this process overall. And how that works is when we submit an offer, we actually include the buyer compensation, the buyer agent compensation as a part of this, as a part of our offer. And by the way, that happens in commercial right now. Second is, or the buyer pays. Hey, if for some reason that we find a property that you like, that the seller is not offering the compensation, I will be the first to talk to you about it. And we can make a decision on whether the economics work in such a way where you are comfortable coming out of pocket to pay for the overall, the buyer agent compensation. Or third, if there's some shortfall associated with what the seller pays and how we negotiate it, there may be a shortfall associated with how the buyer compensation happens. But Mr. and Mrs. Seller, don't worry about how this happens. Before we actually make an offer on any of the properties, I will provide you a net sheet summary on how it all will shake out, and we can use that as a decision-making point to go from there. How does that sound? Right? That's how you would answer this, right? That's how you want to tell them that, hey, there's three potential ways in them to get paid, right? And then those are the ways. And of course, there's uncertainty because you have no idea when you write your offer. And there's uncertainty right now. They have no idea how to write the offer, but you want to give them the options. And then it's very clear when contractually the options are signed. All right. Now, if you're already saying that in some way, good for you, but I will get into this in a second. Here's big idea number 6. Please let me explain this. I've talked to, I actually talked to a real estate attorney about this overall. What is all of this? This is just differently itemized accounting of the same purchase price. All right. This is just differently itemized accounting of the same purchase price. That's all this is. Right. So when they start to understand that, they'll just realize that the decoupling just involves whoever is getting representation is the one that pays for the representation. Cool. Big idea number 7, full idea. I want to show you about a disclosure. You're going to have to disclose and explain commissions and how all the economics work. So I would get into the feeling of understanding and explaining how commissions and the economics work. Please, I will tell you this. The clients know that you have to get paid in some way, right? They want to, of course, get a deal, but they know you're going to have to get paid in some way. And it's our job to disclose completely how that process works and educate them on how we can use the offer, the pricing, the commissions, et cetera, as a leverage strategy point and not just as a cost center, right? Not just as a cost center. So in a lot of ways now, yeah, the buyer commission is a pre-negotiated seller concession, right? That's all this is. A buyer commission is nothing but being a pre-negotiated seller concession. That's all this is. Now we just have to figure out the mechanics of how that actually comes in place. There's no cooperation compensation. No one is cooperating anymore. It is straight buyer. It is buyer compensation. There's no cooperation compensation. All right. So Now let me tell you about this. This is my big idea number 8, the importance of your value proposition. So here's a great post that I saw. It says, hey, okay, buyer's agents, what is going to be your value proposition to justify buyers paying your commission? Here's the interesting part. 89% of buyers, 89% of agents do not have a buyer presentation. I'll say it again. 89% of agents do not have a buyer presentation. All right. 89% of agents do not have a buyer presentation. 27% of agents don't have a listing presentation, which is wild, right? That is why I believe that your buyer presentation is actually more important than your listing presentation. Let me tell you why your buyer presentation is more important than your listing presentation. In a listing presentation scenario, I, the listing agent, is going to go talk to a seller. The seller already understands that a seller is going to interview me, and there's already precedent that a seller is going to pay listing site commission. I don't have to. They know that they're going to do that. But from a buyer perspective, the buyer has not been used to doing that. Therefore, we have to now, they're going to walk in with skeptical eyes. We actually have to deliver a significantly better value proposition on the buyer side to make it a no-brainer for them to work with us. That's why the value proposition is so important, which is why I told you about these 3 things, or 4 things, right? Number 1, we have to develop and deliver a value proposition that is 10x better than listing presentations. Number 2, we have to elegantly explain economics and compensation. Number 3, we have to utilize a buyer broker agreement. Number 4, you're going to adjust forms and workflows. And number 5, you're going to work hard and be kind, right? All right. So I gave you all of those. Here are some top of mind questions, and then I'll open it up. Here's some top of mind questions. Top of mind question number 1. How exactly do I explain this to a buyer, right? I talked to you about how you do the 3 agreements. You tell them about exactly what you do, and you explain how compensation works. That's how you explain it to a buyer. By the way, I don't have time to go into the baseline of this. I'm sure I can do a buyer mastery seminar where I can teach you all the scripting, et cetera, around this, but I wanted to give you the high level to calm your nerves, right? Here's number 2. Do I have to do anything different right now? Yes, you have to learn you have to learn the buyer broker agreement if you don't already use it. And you know there's going to be a new path, based essentially forms, workflows, et cetera, that you have to work with your state broker to ensure that you're going to have to learn the new path, right? Do I have to use a buyer broker agreement? Just assume yes. Just assume everyone else is going to use it. Yes, you have to do it. What happens with VAs and mortgages? Now, as far as VA and mortgages go, VAs are hard because we are still thinking, everyone is going to the aspect and thinking that the buyer is going to have to come out of pocket to actually do this. Please understand this. If a seller does not offer compensation to the buyer, they're actually putting themselves in a competitive disadvantage. We know that until something dramatically changes. We know that, right? So it's not like the VA buyers are going to go away. You're missing the point. This is the same destination in a different route. That's all this is, the same destination in a different route, where the sellers still have the buyer, the compensation to the buyer is a pre-negotiated seller concession. That's what this is right now. Right? And until we figure out the mechanics of how this is implemented, we're going to have to figure out how to actually make all of this work. All right. Let's talk about, a lot of people talked about, is there any opportunity to roll the buyer commission into the loan? Fannie and Freddie have been talking about, we need HUD, Fannie and Freddie to come together to actually make this happen. And I'm going to wager, I personally am going to wager that this is going to happen in the near future, because it only makes sense to have the facility where a buyer can roll their buyer commissions into the loan so that they have the ability to do that. And so we need some mortgage product innovation when it comes to that. Don't know when that's going to happen, but I'm going to wager that's going to happen in the near future. I don't know what the near future is, but that mortgage product innovation, when it happens, it'll allow buyers to roll buyer commission into the loan, which will be, a lot more independent for buyers to do their things. A few of you asked us about where is real in the settlement overall. We are in the process of working on it. And when we have more information, I'll share that with you. And last but not least, should I only focus on listings? Please, let's talk about this for a second. Should I only focus on listings? So I see a lot of coaches and gurus, et cetera, talking about, hey, you should focus on listings right now. I will tell you that is dumb, right? There's 2 sides to a transaction, right? There's 2 sides to a transaction. Yes, it is always helpful to focus on listings, because when you have listings, you control the inventory, you control the market, you bring back, it's an easier business model to have overall. I get it. But just saying, bye-bye buyers agents, it's dumb. Right? Yes, buyers are future listings. You're going to help people on both sides of the transaction. That isn't, so the problem is you should not focus on your listing. You should focus on your skill. You want to be able to have a really good listing conversation. You want to have a good, really buyer conversation. Otherwise, that's essentially like making sure that your left bicep is extra strong and your right bicep is super weak. That's weird. Don't do that. right? That's strange. So it's don't only focus on listings. Yes, it makes sense that your listing game should be high, but if you actually just had better skill, you would win a lot more. All right. I got to leave you with this, which I think is pretty funny. It says, my friend Laura Monroe said, here's my initial thoughts on the NAR settlement. I need a margarita, right? Now, all that I like this for a reason. Let me tell you why, right? While I think it's funny, let me tell you why. It is the same. You and I talked about this. You have Laguna Beach to LA. You have Route 1 and you have Route 2. We have been in Route 1. Now there's Route 2. It's just a new world. There's a lot of things that need to happen from an implementation perspective. Let's just not start over speculating on all of this. So let me give you like 4 clear next steps, which I think will help you overall. You have to do 4 things. All right. Number 1 is to educate, don't defend. All right. Educate, don't defend. And what I mean by educate, don't defend is instantly your clients are going to say, hey, Sharon, I heard about this thing. Hey, I heard there was conspiracy. Hey, I heard there was commission inflation, blah, blah, blah. And your job is to educate, not defend. And the way you educate is you ask the question so you get contextual understanding of where you are. So you can say, hey, Mr. Mrs. Seller, or hey, Mr. Mrs. Client, what have you been reading that has got you interested? What have you been reading that has got you concerned? What have you been reading that has got you intrigued? And then once they give you some information, you can educate, not defend. All right. Education is good energy. Defense, low energy. Here's number 2. Protect your relationship with the buyer agency agreement. Now it's really good. The sell, you know exactly what you have alignment. They know exactly what you're going to do. You know what exactly they're going to do. They're going to compensate you and you're going to get paid for services. In a lot of ways, the buyer agency agreement or the buyer broker agreement is a listing agreement in reverse. So you're so happy when you get 14 listings. You should be super happy when you get 14 buyer agency agreements signed. It's a really good thing, right? Because now you have a very tight cohort of people that are committed to working with you that you can take care of, which is really, really powerful. Number 3, I saw this and I wanted to kind of share this with you quickly. Scott Bunn shared this. He says, agents are distracted as you can be right now with all of the news that's going on in the industry. Just keep executing on your strategy and don't get distracted or discouraged by it. The pros come out fine. Here's the interesting part. We talked about the same thing. This is Los Angeles. This is Laguna Beach. For now, there are 2 routes. It is the same destination with different paths. We just have to figure out the mechanics of these paths. That's all this is. So focus on your business. I would offer to you, if you want to make posts, this is just a recommendation. If you want to make posts, maybe a couple of posts educating the consumer on exactly what this is, go ahead and do that. But if you want to make posts just to stir the pot, don't do that. It is not necessary right now. Focus on your business, stay focused, because focus is more important than intelligence right now. Stay focused, work on your business, take care of your clients, and don't stir the pot. Because there's enough people stirring the pot and they think it's funny, but there's enough people stirring the pot that you don't need to, because anything could change from an implementation perspective. All right. Last but not least, I want to give you this. You need to develop a bulletproof process and a value proposition. And we've been doing this on the real side for several months now, ever since this happened. So I run this series called Buyer Mastery, and I hope some of you can attend that at some point. If you have come to a Buyer Mastery at some point, just put a me in the chat. That way people know that you've attended a Buyer Mastery at some point. The key part of Buyer Mastery is that I teach you 3 big things. I teach you how to attract, convert, and deliver a great buyer value proposition. Then I take you through the perfect flow of a buyer consultation, and I give you all the artifacts that are necessary to actually do all of this. And then I talk you through all the objection handlers and give you so much more. In fact, I'm doing one tomorrow in Dallas. It's an all-day event. I've taken a 4-day event and I compressed it in 8 hours. So if you like what I'm doing today, imagine 8 hours of me, you're going to get bored, right? 8 hours of this, but this is the only event that you need to attend, because I break down for you what it takes to buy a home in today's market and how you can be an advisor of choice in all of this. There is no online version of this yet, but hopefully when I do it, we can help you with it. So I gave you a lot of these today. I want to spend a minute or two if you all have any questions and thoughts around this, but I wanted to give you a big piece of this puzzle today, right? So thoughts, feelings on this. Why don't we take a minute and share anything that is on your mind, and I'll try to answer this overall, all right? So a couple things about Dex. If you registered for the event, we will register for this. We will make sure to send you all the slides. I will send you my chicken scratch right on slides, and we'll send you the replay just in case you have it. I know there's probably press and media on this call that want to fact check me. Please go ahead and do that. I was just trying to do the best for our industry and help our agents think through this overall. Consumers, if you're on this call, home buyers and sellers, please know that real estate agents work super hard to take care of you. We're just trying to figure out the new world so that we can protect you more than anything else. There are questions about, will there be a requirement about having a buyer broker agreement before you show a house? This is all in implementation phases right now, which is why I'm suggesting you stay close to your state brokers. There's going to be some forms and processes that come out, which will outline some best practices. But think about it this way, right? If you are going to sign a listing agreement to work with the seller, you probably should sign a buyer agreement to work with the buyer. That's essentially all it is. These representation agreements are going to become pretty standard. Question. Will a company enforce buyer agency contracts if buyer, there's a question here. Will a company enforce buyer agency contracts if buyers agree to pay, then don't? Well, of course, here's the interesting part. Everything is based on a contract. So if you said you were going to give me $100 and you signed a piece of paper that you said you were going to give me $100 and you don't give me $100, well, there's going to be some action against that. That's why we enter into agreements, right? So yes, again, this is implementation. We have to figure out the process of how all of that works. And this is the new world. It is the same destination, Laguna Beach to LA. It's path number 2, and we're going to have to enforce around it. It's no different than if a seller was going to pay on the listing agreement side and didn't pay it, or didn't pay the concession, or didn't pay whatever. It's the same exact thing, right? There's a couple of questions about dual agency and the use of buyer agency agreement. So dual agency, there's a lot of discussion about dual agency as a concept. Essentially, that may potentially go away in the near future. So whether or not that happens, I don't know. There's a handful of states, probably something like a third of the states right now, that do not allow dual agency. There's a good chance that you're going to see that grow because it kind of creates more transparency in the process. I would not be surprised if in the near future, if dual agency becomes a standard, if not allowing dual agency becomes standard across the board. Now, just from an agency perspective, it is not like a real agent and a real agent. That's what dual agency is, right? You have agency, a real agent on one side and a real agent on the side of the transaction. It's that when the dual agency is related to the same agent is where the issue is, because it's hard to have 2 fiduciary responsibilities to 2 different parties. So I'm going to wager that at some point in the future, you're going to see more about dual agency coming up. Okay, cool. All right. So, I'm right on time. Here's what I'm going to offer to all of you. We're going to do 3 things. If you want to take a screenshot or something with a crazy face, you should, because this would be your way to tag me. And that way I know I can be in your feed some more. So feel free to do that if you would like. And hopefully this was broadly helpful, but I'm going to leave this by giving you one thing. I made 5 recommendations when I started. I'm going to start with the same 5 recommendations again. Number 1, you want to develop and deliver a value proposition on the buyer side that is 10 times more valuable than the listing presentation. Hopefully you'll come to one of my buyer masteries and I can give you my entire playbook so that you can utilize this overall. Number 2, you want to elegantly explain economics and compensation, because when you do that, it puts all of you in deep alignment. Number 3, you want to start utilizing a buyer broker agreement. Number 4, as the new implementation comes out, you want to adjust forms and workflows overall. And number 5, please work hard and be kind. The world's asking for a lot of grace from us right now, especially in both at home and abroad with a lot of turmoil. So I would offer you to approach all of this with a lot of grace, because we get one chance to do this well. We get one chance to do this right. We get one chance to serve the world. Let's do it in a thoughtful way. I appreciate all of you. Thank you so much for spending time with us. Hopefully this was helpful and it allayed your fears overall. Just think Laguna Beach to LA, this is just a different route, and we get a chance to up our skills so we can do better in the future. Hopefully this was helpful. Just shoot me a message if I can be helpful. Shoot me a DM. Post this on Instagram if you think other people need to, but we will send you slides. We will send you replays, and we will send you the recording so that you can share this and you can review this if you would like. We appreciate all of you. Thank you so much for being with us. A lot of grace to you. All right. A lot of grace to you, and we'll see you very soon.